seems that lately I've been talking about the same thing, particularly seems like it. I often think that there's not much to say in Zen, you know, so we find different ways to say the same thing. But at the same time, there's, of course, Zen is such a big practice, so we can take various aspects, I guess. And yet, as in the Lankavatara Sutra and the different scriptures tells us, you know, the famous saying from Bodhidharma, you know, the 4 lines. And basically, it's this practice and transmission beyond words and phrases, transmitting the Buddha mind, seeing nature and becoming Buddha, and waking up. It's always fun to discover new things in the pile of books that I sometimes have in the unkept bookshelf in front of me by the window. And I found this journal from the Journal of the Institute of Buddhist Studies from the fall of 2004. And it's an article by Taigen Dan Layton, who some of you know is I think of himself an old friend, but I have not seen him in a long time since he moved to Chicago. He's translated a lot of Dogen's books, and especially that Ehe Koroku with Shoko Kamura. So he has an article here. It's a rather academic journal, but there's always some fun things that are that I find enjoyable. Some of them are terribly obscure. But this is, the title is kind of weird. Dogen's Cosmology of Space and the Practice of Self-Fulfillment. Dogen's Cosmology of Space and the Practice of Self-Fulfillment. What I basically appreciate of this short text is the story that starts Taigen speaking a little bit about what he's going to be writing and the importance of Dogen's being time, that fascicle, you know. And he says how much in modern times that particular fascicle is really used. And I guess because of the you know, being and time and being, and you know, modern, if we could call Heidegger modern, well, of course, it's modern compared to Dogen. But also, you know, the physics, the contemporary physics, which I know nothing about, other than sometimes when I read something and I understand because I understand practice. And through practice, I can translate, whether I'm doing it right or not, I'm not sure, the little bit of quantum physics that sometimes I read, or some concepts that they're describing. And it's, of course, it's this, the subject of this moment. In the Lotus Sutra, it's talked about Ichi, Ichinen Sansen. Each single moment encompasses the 3,000 worlds. The 3,000 worlds is sort of like a synonym of everything, of all the worlds. It's like the 10,000 things about things, but this is the worlds. Each single moment, ichi nen, that nen that we repeat in the Meiji-ku Kanon Gyo, nen nen furishin, nen nen fushinki, shushinki, moment by moment, thought moment by thought moment. The thought moment encompasses the 3,000. And Taigen here says that, well, he says, Dogen begins his, well, let me write the first paragraph, read the first paragraph. Dogen discussed extensively the old encounter dialogue text, even if he did not conduct formal koan training in the sense of a particular koan curriculum, as in some Rinzai Zen, as well as some medieval Soto Zen. Dogen comments on the old stories of the ancestors in great many of his writings. One such writing about space is in the Shobogen Koku. Koku, which means space. Ku. Actually, well, here it says, he begins his essay with a story about two Chinese Zen masters, Shigong Huizhang and his younger Dharma brother, Zhitang Zizang. Shigong asked, do you know how to grasp space? The younger brother, Zhizang, says, yes, I do. Shigong asked, how do you grasp space? Shigong stroked the air with his hand. Shigong said, you don't know how to grasp space. Shizang asked, how do you grasp space? Oh, grasp space. Grasp it, older brother. Shizang grasped his younger brother's nose and yanked it. It might even be read that he stuck his finger in the younger brother's nostrils before pulling it. Either way, Shizang yelled in pain, you're killing me. You tried to pull my nose off. Shigong said, you can grasp it now. What I found interesting about this story is that in a way, it's very much connected to space and time with being. And Taigen says, before discussing Dogen's commentary on this story, we may note that the one ordinary idea of space is a kind of empty container, just as our conventional idea of time, disputed by Dogen and Uji, is one objective temporal container. But for Dogen, space is form itself. Space is your nostril and your nose around it. Dogen says, space is one ball that bounces here and there. About Shigong, he says, you can grasp it now. Dogen says, it is not that space and other space reached out together with one hand. It's Dogen, it's funny the way he says, it's not that space and other space reach together with one hand, to grasp his nose. There is no gap in the entire world to let space in. But this story has been peal of thunder in space. But this story has been a peal of thunder in space. Dogen adds, you have some understanding of grasping space. Even if you have a good finger to grasp space, you should penetrate the inside and the outside of space. You should kill space and give life to space. You should know the weight of space. You should trust that the Buddha's ancestors endeavor on the way in aspiration, practice, and enlightenment throughout the challenging dialogues is no other than grasping space. So here, it's interesting how he says, how old is space? What's the weight of space? Could be an interesting check-in question in this koan. One of his basic writings about space that clarifies this is a story that Dogen tells in a couple of places. He related it to in 1244 in an essay called Turning the Dharma Wheel. A couple of years later, he told a slightly different version of it, recorded in Dharma Hall Discourse 179. The word honored one, quote, Shakyamuni Buddha said, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, when one person wakes up, and naturally that waking up is returning to the source, all space in the 10 directions disappears. All space in the 10 directions disappears. Then he quotes another Japanese master, Chinese, Wu Zhu Faiyan. When one person opens up reality and returns to the source, all space in the 10 direction crashes together, resounding everywhere. A successor of Wu Zhu said, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, in all space, in the 10 directions, flowers are added on to brocade. And one of Yuan Wu's successors, Fujing Fatai, said, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, all space in the 10 directions is simply all space in the 10 directions. When one person opens up reality and returns to the source, all space in the 10 directions is simply all space in the 10 directions. Then quoting his teacher, Wu Jing, says, although the world-honored one made this statement, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, all space in the 10 directions disappears. When one person, then Wu Jing said, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, a mendicant breaks his rice bowl. So, there's all these statements, basically, everything is broken and there's nothing else, or everything is just what it is, or the mendicant breaks his bowl. The mendicant don't need a bowl anymore, it's not a mendicant anymore. It's a Buddha. There is a question in all these various utterances about the effect of awakening. How does awakening affect not just the person who is awakening, and not just other sentient beings around him or her, but what is the relationship between awakening and space itself? And the space itself implies all the forms that are space, that is, all sentient beings, whose liberation is the concern of the Mahayana path. See, so here's Dogen completely equating space with form, and of course, form, space, the being, and time, although he hasn't mentioned time here yet. There's a question in the space itself. Dogen's teachers said that when that happens, when one person opens up reality and returns to the source, a mendicant breaks his rice bowl. This might be interpreted as an expression for a monk fulfilling his practice, no longer needing to pursue his mendicancy. But Dogen himself said, the previous 5 venerable teachers said it like this, but I say that it's not like theirs. When one person opens up reality and returns to the source, all space in the 10 directions open up reality and return to the source. I hadn't really read about this equation that Dogen makes about space and form. Although, we're very familiar with Masu and Baishang walking out in the field, and one of them looks up and sees the wild geese, Oh, the wild geese. Oh, and he says, where did they go? Did they fly? They fly away, he said. And the teacher grabs his nose and twists it. Ouch, ow, ow. What do you mean fly away? What is this? Ow, ow. That's it. Here, Taigen, what he does with this theme of space, he quotes a whole bunch of different fascicles in which this motif is expressed. One of them it's a really beautiful one called One Bright Pearl. And Dogen relates a dialogue from a Chinese master, Xuanxia, who said, the whole universe in 10 directions is one bright pearl. Who said, the 10 direction is a standard Buddhist term referring to the 4 directions, the 4 intermediaries between them, and up and down, representing all directions. After hearing this, Xuanxia, a statement by Xuanxia, one of his monks asked, the whole universe in the 10 directions is one bright pearl. How should I understand that? Xuanxia said, the whole universe in the 10 directions, one bright pearl. What is there to understand? So when I started, I said that I seem to be talking about the same thing. I quoted a Chilean poet, Raúl Zurita, that said, vives en este segundo todos tus tiempos. You live. In this second, you live all your times. That space, time, form, here, now. The practice of shamatha, the cultivation of quietness of mind, in which we quiet the mind enough so we can sit in this vast ground of existence, this cushion, this ground. The ground that we touch, it's a shin. Aiken Roshi always used to say, shin is the touching of the heart-mind. It's the encountering of the heart-mind. It's the becoming intimate with this mind. I particularly like the touching as the Buddha, when he touches the earth, when Mara is threatening him, who the hell do you think you are, that you can proclaim such truth? And he just touches with his right arm, right hand, the earth, the ground, this bare ground where we practice and where we sit in Zazen. and where we can wake up at this moment, in this bare ground, in this body, now. This form, this space, this time. Yeah, it's a little bit longer. Taigen keeps on using different metaphors and different fascicles from Dogen to expound on space and time, form and emptiness, this moment, here now. I've been saying pretty much since March, that we have this opportunity to practice, and how grateful we can be for our practice, especially on times like this, that our practice can become a little realer because the truth is more available. It's more in our faces. In a way, more like sesshin. We encounter this self over and over again. And that, at first, with resistance, or whatever place we might find ourselves, but as sesshin progresses, and we've all experienced this, how naturally things open up and the resistance decreases, and we find ourselves in a simpler place, touching this ground as we walk in kinhin, step by step, as we sit on our cushion. It's interesting how Taigen mentions that, when he's going to quote this particular story, and he says how not that Dogen used koans for people to sit with, like in the Rinzai tradition, as well as some medieval Soto Zen. Dogen comments on the old stories of the ancestors in great many of his writings. And of course, we that use koans use them a little bit different. But Dogen, whenever he mentions his koans, he always says, investigate this, whatever he might mean by that. He certainly doesn't mean drop it. So I think that's all I want to say. Maybe some of you want to share something about this or something else. Yeah. Thank you. Glad I see you're back, Grace. You're back home from your evacuation. Welcome back. whenever you got back.
Thank you. Yeah, it was Saturday we came back, so.
All right. You know, when some of us use the koan who hears sometimes, you know, at some point in our practice. And it's who is hearing, and it's very difficult, it seems sometimes, you know, for not to really fall into some kind of a immediate trying to respond in one way or another. And of course, the koan, as I was reading Rilke a while ago, you know, it tells us to hold the question, you know, as if they were like an old arcana kind of a thing, you know, old something, not rushing into trying to find the appropriate response. And this koan, all that it does, it makes you stay with the sound when it's happening. Of course, I always tell people, when there's no sound, don't try to look, try to hear the sound so you can ask yourself who is hearing. In the meantime, just do your practice that you usually do, whether you've been doing breath counting or breath awareness. But if we listen, if we just listen, I was talking to somebody today that mentioned something like, it's like sometimes it's the whole room, and that includes this, who listens, you know. And I think that that's a good beginning. Not a beginning, because it's a little bit more than a beginning, but that kind of sensation, that kind of, I think it has everything to do with shamatha practice of sitting quietly and having the mind quiet up, you know. And it's as when it quiets up, and let's say it's raining outside, what a beautiful sound to sit in sesshin is with rain, or the birds in the morning. It's not unusual for people to experience that it's this whole thing, listening, that there's just listening. Well, and then comes the teacher, like giving you, as Geraldine, a woman that sat here at the beginning of Rocks and Clouds Zendo, he used to say, that's one of the most terrifying questions that the teacher asks you, is show me, don't tell me, show me. There's somebody from Ohio that posted this really far out picture of an owl inside like a dead trunk. It's like it's just sitting there, the owl, you know, intense with the view, you know, the look in its eyes. And there's this rabbit, you know, that that was climbing probably the trunk of the tree, and then all of a sudden sees this owl like that. And he said, and this woman says in the post in Facebook, somehow this reminds me of dokusan and seeing the teacher, you know. And it's really charming, you know, because the rabbit, you can't see quite her eyes, you know, or its eyes, but it's like she was probably just coming up there, and all of a sudden, oh, you know? Yeah. And so often, that's so much an experience of seeing something, of that being surprised, that has so much to do with our practice. And a good sign of our practice is when we are surprised by our own self, by our own movement or movement outside of ourselves, you know. That moment. Oh. Oh.
I like the space and the sound, how they're connected. And you were talking about the space in a room doesn't get bigger when we take furniture out, and it doesn't get smaller when we put furniture in.
Right.
The space is where the furniture is just as much as where the furniture isn't. And then from there, that's the whole universe, the bright pearl. And then we know the thing about turn the light around. To me, the who hears is turn the sound around. And then when we go into that, we find out that the sound isn't just where the silence is, and the silence just isn't where the sound is. It's the sound and the silence are the same, like the space and the furniture are the same.
Yeah.